Greetings, friends of liberty. No one listening here will have missed the extraordinary train of events as occurred in the last 2 weeks, with President Donald J. Trump calling the democratically elected president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, a dictator. The same president who has courageously withstood, with the force of American European arms, an invasion by an actual genocidal dictator, Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin. When asked subsequently by a reporter whether Putin himself was a dictator, President Trump, to his everlasting shame, infamously refused to give the morally obvious answer. His evasion perhaps not surprising, given his own longtime series of ethical lapses. All these events and many more lead us to legitimately pose the following question. Is President Donald J. Trump a traitor? In order to answer, let's examine the following relevant issues. Number one of the primary ways I judge any human being is by how much they lie. The more they lie, the worse they are, becoming an increasing danger to everyone around them. And on this score, as is well known by now, it can be said of President Trump, as the lyrics of the country song by the band Perry state, "You lie like a priceless Persian rug on a rich man's floor. You lie like a coon dog basking in the sunshine on my porch. You lie like a penny in the parking lot at the grocery store. It just comes way too natural to you, the way you lie." So President Trump, lying almost as often as he breathes, believing in the small, the big, and the medium lie all, has chosen as his cabinet members the second time around, not surprisingly, people who love lying just as much as he. In many ways, his cabinet is a cabinet of mendacity. Elon Musk, whose lies about his vaporware products over decades are legendary. Christian nationalist J.D. Vance, among whose many lies were those saying that A, 100% of net job creation under the Biden administration has gone to the foreign-born, when in reality it was less than half. B, in saying that Haitian refugees were eating cats and dogs. And C, in saying or implying that Trump actually won the 2020 election. Then we have RFK Jr., whose lies about vaccines and other subjects could fill the Britannica. Secretary of State Pete Hegseth, who stated under oath that every single allegation of misconduct against me was an anonymous smear, which meant that Hegseth both disowned his own mother and called her a liar. And finally, conspiracy monger Tulsi Gabbard, who spread Russian disinformation about Syrian dictator Assad and his chemical attacks, following that up with more Russian disinformation about alleged bioweapons labs in Ukraine. Is a person who constantly swallows Russian disinformation like a porn star deftly swallowing a monster penis someone you want as your director of national intelligence? For Trump, the answer is yes. Note that when I did a review last July of Vance's book Hillbilly Elegy, I concluded by saying that this intolerant, violent, ignorant nationalist, who may soon be only a heartbeat away from the presidency, instead of reinforcing Donald Trump's best instincts, reinforces his worst. And that's exactly, to a T, what happened. The problem now is Trump's cabinet choices is that they're much more ultra-MAGA, much less intellectually independent, and much less capable in general than those Trump picked the first time around, which bodes ill for America, its allies, and the world at large. Friday last, this liar president tag-teamed with a liar Vance and MAGA reporters, along with the silent consent of embarrassed Secretary of State Marco Rubio, to continue their previous abuse of the Ukrainian president, now on national television, in full view of the world. They uttered the following lies. A, Vance claimed the path to peace and the path to prosperity is, maybe, engaging in diplomacy. That's utterly false. The only kind of diplomacy the war criminal and genocidal murderer Putin engages in is the same kind that Hitler engaged in. And we all know how well the appeasement of Neville Chamberlain worked. What both Hitler respected and Putin respects is the potential of violence against him. Nothing else. So when Vance followed that falsehood up, saying, what makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy, every American or British World War II veteran who fought on the beaches of Normandy, in the woods of the Ardennes, or the Battle of the Atlantic, unlike Vance, knows the value of diplomatic appeasement. 0. Stick your appeasement where the sun don't shine, hillbilly. B. And this was precisely what President Zelensky then pointed out. Diplomacy doesn't work with genocidal dictators, which is why the American diplomacy of Obama, Trump, and Biden, and the German of Merkel all completely failed to deter Putin. 0 for 4, despite the fact that, as Zelensky then said, all of them told me that he will never go in and invade. C. How did that lying JD then respond? Being wrong, he changed the subject and then told President Zelensky that, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office to try to litigate this in front of the American media. What a hypocrite, after he and the president did this exact thing to Zelensky. Not surprising, since only a few years ago, the very same JD was calling Trump a total fraud whom he can't stomach. D. Then Trump chimes in and claims that you've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position. Allowed yourself. After Russia invaded Ukraine because no American or European administration supported Ukraine. And that after Ukraine had given up its own nuclear weapons in 1996 upon the explicit assurance by American, Britain, and Russian that Ukraine's sovereignty would be respected and defended. Naturally, the liars Trump and Vance never brought up the signing of what's called the Budapest Memorandum. E. Trump then adds, you're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. Now, Trump has never once had the courage to tell the only person who actually started the war, Vladimir Putin, that he is to blame. No, Trump admires the fascists too much. As an excellent YouTube video of under 2 minutes explains, this would be like Franklin Roosevelt having told Winston Churchill, if he had visited the White House in 1940, that Churchill was responsible for starting World War II. Which is why the most destabilizing thing that the West and America could do would be to capitulate to Putin's aggression. And nothing would make Xi Jinping happier and more motivated when he looks across the Taiwan Straits to know President Trump's love of dictators like himself and to see America's geopolitical realignment with the axis of evil. F. Vance, then continuing his abuse of Zelensky, asked, have you said thank you once, implying that Zelensky is ungrateful? But the reality is, as shown by another YouTube video 4 minutes long, is that Zelensky has thanked America, Trump, and the West dozens of times, including once that very day. G. Zelensky, amid Trump's and Vance's constant interruptions, then asks if he's allowed to answer by saying, can I answer? And Trump replies, no, you've done a lot of talking. When it's mainly Trump and his attack chihuahua Vance who have combined to harass and browbeat Zelensky and to evade his truthful responses. H. Vance then again says, just say thank you, and then says that Zelensky should stop trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. Isn't that like an Ivy League lawyer? Again, when Vance and Trump were the ones who started it. In other words, Zelensky should just mutely nod his head in agreement with everything these two liars say or imply. Otherwise, he's trying to litigate the issue. I. Trump then claims Zelensky doesn't want a ceasefire, which is again false, as Zelensky tries to explain, because a ceasefire without any security guarantees against Putin invading again would be a pointless capitulation. When a reporter makes this very point to Trump, Trump replies, what if the bomb drops in your head right now? Okay, what if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. This again is a pure falsehood, since everything that Trump has done is the exact opposite, having encouraged Putin to continue the war against Ukraine. Putin has zero respect for Trump. J. The interview concludes when Trump lies even more about Zelensky, saying, "You're not acting at all thankful, and that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing." It is going to be great television, I will say that. Note that Trump said, "I'll be honest," right when he's lying. That's one of the methods of liars. But what Zelensky did was simply try to calmly respond to Trump and advance his points, as anyone can watch and see, but all he got was two nationalist rectums playing to their MAGA base on national television. Trump, Vance, and Musk constantly lie because they know a majority of MAGA will quickly and eagerly swallow their lies. So having seen the mendacity that comprised Trump's character and that of his administration, let's make a brief detour about American political polarization. The essential problem facing America and the West in general is that there are virtually no classically liberal political parties of any strength, because there are relatively few classical liberals to begin with. To a degree, the UK, with Reform UK, is trying to form a third quasi-classical liberal party, but in America, the only present game in town is the Democrats or Republicans. Libertarians only get about 1% of the national electoral vote on average. This is a problem, since classical liberal solutions are by far the best. So, for example, while Biden wasn't bad on Ukraine and free trade, he was horrendous domestically with increased business and energy regulation, woke, green, and identity politics, inflation, and an increased welfare state. Trump is the opposite, horrendous on Ukraine and free trade, but good on fighting woke and freeing the economy. Classical liberalism, however, would combine the best of both while avoiding the worst, which is why Nikki Haley would have been the best president for America. Understanding that, let's look at what the classical liberal Washington, Jefferson, John or Quincy Adams, Monroe, or Madison would have done in Ukraine. Number one, first, they would have supported Ukraine from the beginning with more weapons, allowing freer use of them while not being intimidated by Putin's empty threats. They wouldn't have been the cowards that Biden and Jake Sullivan were. A bold approach would have emboldened more Ukrainians of fighting age to enlist, which is one of the specious complaints Trump made to Zelensky while abusing him. In addition, the Allies should have already confiscated the $300 billion in Russian central bank reserves sitting in Western bank accounts and given those to Ukraine. Number two, Russia right now as a country is on the ropes. Its army and economy in tatters after 3 years of fighting. If U.S. and European leaders would fully support Ukraine for a year or two more, they could quite possibly destroy what remains of Russia's armed forces, causing Putin's regime to collapse. In addition, the U.S. could have given or sold Ukraine many more F-16s, which would have allowed it to conduct serious air-to-ground operations, helping them regain lost territory. All this would have made a Ukrainian victory likely and would have been an enormous foreign policy triumph for the West, reclaiming Western moral and military superiority and reestablishing the international rule of law. America, thereby, would again have assured its allies that it stands on the side of justice and national sovereignty, also thereby sending a clear warning to China that Taiwan should remain free. But what instead has President Trump done? A, he's threatened or actually levied illegal tariffs and spewed hostile rhetoric against Canada, one of America's most trusted allies and friends, thereby arousing such an understandable and justifiable Canadian reaction that the Conservative candidate for Premier, Pierre Poilievre, who is going to win the national elections, now appears likely to lose. Good going, Trumples. B, in 1960, the U.S. had 40% of world GDP, and now it has 24%. Is that bad, as Trump seems to think? Is the world economy a zero-sum game? No, 24% of world trade is great because it's 24% of 109 trillion world trade, as opposed to 40% of 1.3 trillion in 1960. Free trade, not protectionism, was the main cause that grew the world economic pie so enormously for everyone, and thus grew American GDP itself from $500 billion in 1960 to $29 trillion in 2024. Trump's actions are damaging that international growth already, with recent reports showing that the United States economy is starting to retract. And Wall Street is reflecting that increasing uncertainty. Since traders understand the important role of free trade in national and international prosperity, Wall Street is already down from its November 29th highs, all caused by Trump. C. To reiterate, many of Trump's foreign policy blunders, such as in threatening Greenland and Panama, would never have happened in his first term, but now that his crew of lying ultra-MAGA cabinet members surround him, insulating him from all common sense, all bets are off. D. Is President Trump a Russian agent? Is he being paid by the Russians? There's no evidence, but it doesn't matter whether he is or not, because he's acting exactly as if he were. The American founders would have been appalled at his depraved attempts to force a Ukrainian capitulation to Putin. In conclusion, is President Donald J. Trump a traitor? There's no question that what he's doing to Ukraine and to other friendly countries like Mexico and Canada and to America itself is highly unpatriotic, but is it treasonous? Yes. What Trump is doing now and even voting in the UN with Russia and North Korea and illegally threatening tariffs and cutting off congressionally approved funding to Ukraine is a betrayal of everything America stands for. Trump is to be reviled, scorned, despised, mocked, and condemned, slapped again and again in the face with the nature of his evil. Trump and his mendacious, violence-loving nationalists are endangering the rule of law, world peace, and prosperity, the very peace that America and its allies have protected at the great personal sacrifice of their millions of veterans for over a century. Trump's treatment of Ukraine itself is 10 times worse than Biden's cowardly withdrawal from Afghanistan. And for the first time in the 21st century, an American president is using the nation as an international force for evil, not good. Pure treason. Happy that here in late 18th century England, we every year joyously celebrate Guy Fawkes Day, remembering how effectively we have dealt with our own traitors. I bid you well, and remain the Scarlet Pimpernel.